a very busy week in Missouri politics. We're going to welcome right into our first interview with Bev Randles, candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Bev, welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Well, thanks a lot, Scott. It's great to be here.
We're very glad to have you. Let's just start with a question that I think most people wonder about Lieutenant Governor, why you're running.
Well, for my entire life, I've really been very interested in politics and been active in Missouri politics for nearly 10 years. And I'm former chairman of the Missouri Club for Growth, which is an economic political PAC. And in that capacity, I was able to fight for things like tax cuts and a lot of reforms, that really are important to the state. And I thought, as lieutenant governor, I can take that work to a different level and be even a greater impact for the state.
So walk us through your background that led you to run for office. We know Club for Growth, highly successful political action group here in the state. That must have been fun. It's been some good years for Republicans, good years for the Club for Growth, I assume.
Absolutely.
So walk me through your background before then that led you to today.
Well, I grew up down in southeast Missouri, down in Sykeston, not far from where you grew up.
Not far from West Butler County.
That's right. And I grew up on a farm there. My dad was a farmhand, my mom was a housekeeper. And, but my entire life is really a testament of what can happen, for anyone who lives in America. My parents didn't have an education, neither of them beyond the 9th grade, but they instilled in me and all my siblings that we could do anything we wanted to do. So I went to law school. I ultimately went to law school. And, I graduated from University of Missouri, practiced law in Kansas City at the largest firm in Kansas City for many years. That's where I met my wonderful husband. And
but some folks in the political world know him from running for governor himself, right?
That's right. My husband ran for governor in 2012, lost in the primary, but that actually afforded us a great opportunity to get around the state and to get to know the folks and get to know what the real issues are that are impacting our state in a great way.
He can't be the campaign spouse that complains about you traveling to Chillicothe and Caruthersville because he's done it to you, right? I mean, it's turnabout's fair play.
Yeah, absolutely. I was on the campaign trail with him we campaigned for almost 2 years, and I was with him that entire time.
Well, so walk me through, you're doing the Club for Growth stuff. You want to be lieutenant governor. What are some issues that you think you can make a difference on in lieutenant governor as opposed to a pretty influential position with the Club for Growth?
Well, the lieutenant governor's office really affords a huge platform for anyone who's in that position. And, the current lieutenant governor has done that. And I think many people have been very pleased with some things that have happened in the state for conservatives. Sure. But we can take it even further. For me, taxes are a huge issue. As chairman of the Club for Growth, I fought very hard to help secure the first income tax reduction that the state has had in nearly 100 years. And that was a good start, but it's just a start. We've got to do more in that because you're a much better judge of what you can do with your money than the government.
You may be talking to the only newspaper publisher in the state that'll give you an amen on that.
Well, I think most of the citizens of the state believe that too, and so I want to be an advocate for that. And also, as you know, education is a huge issue. And for me, it's enormous because I would not be sitting here today but for the opportunities that I got through education. Right now in Kansas City and St. Louis, we are really failing our kids. I'm in favor of a school choice program where that way if someone is their kid's sitting in an inner city school or even a rural school and their kid's not getting quality education, well, they can then find a school that is something that they know that their kid is going to benefit from.
One of the parts of this that's very seldom discussed, and I know in this climate it's maybe not even popular to talk about, but if in St. Louis, where it's school choice is a much bigger issue, I went to school in Butler County. There really wasn't a lot of choice. I mean, you drove a long way to get to school. Did you go to Sykeston or where'd you go high school?
I went to Scott County Central.
Scott County Central. So you had a little bit of choice there, and you're close enough to Cape. You could probably choose a private school if you wanted to. But in St. Louis, how is it fair for a person who lives in a school district with maybe a low tax levy, who doesn't have a very good school, to come to a school district where the residents there are paying a higher tax levy to maybe provide a better school? Does anybody really talk about those families that are paying more taxes and getting more for their money, and then the whole county can come to their school?
Well, and I, of course, get questions like that when I'm talking about these issues on the campaign trail. But here's what I say. We're paying for it anyway as a state. And I think we're doing not just the kids a huge disservice, but we're doing ourselves as a state a huge disservice. Right now, we have our unemployment rate in Missouri is just under 6%. That's higher than the national rate right now. And we cannot continue down this path because I think the unemployment rate and the lack of quality education run hand in hand. We can't separate them. And
So you're talking about corrections, public services, they all go into that cost of not providing that education.
absolutely. And as I see it, look, we are going to pay for these kids at some point. We can either pay for it now when we can make sure that they are becoming functioning, good members of society with good jobs and good opportunities, or we can pay for it later when, unfortunately, many of them would end up in prisons and on entitlement programs. So I would much rather pay for it now when we can make sure that they have the opportunities that they need to succeed, because we could have the next Einstein sitting in an inner city school right now in St. Louis or Kansas City, and we would never know it because that kid is not getting the education that they deserve.
So when you talk about school choice, how long would you have to implement school choice before you saw those schools become better, go out of business, whatever? How long? It seems like a kid that's in 7th grade now that's been in a failing school, there's not a lot of answers for that kid. But if you start younger, that might be the solution. I mean, how long does it take to see some of these generational patterns change?
Well, the word you just used is correct. They are generational patterns. These things have been going on for decades, and it would be foolish for anyone to assume that they are going to be corrected overnight. I think that we've got to give this, at least 10 to 20 years to really see how it's going to impact the kids. But right now, all we're doing is the same thing over and over and over again, and we're not getting any positive results out of it. Not every parent is going to choose to send their kid to one of these different schools, a better school. Of course they're not. But for the ones who want to, and for the kids who really feel like, well, hey, I can go to this school, down the street there, and I know I can succeed, I know I can do better. We need to make sure that we're giving them the opportunity to do that.
You say maybe we need to start thinking about schools as a state function instead of a district function?
Well, I certainly don't want to speak in terms of not being in favor of local control, because I think that the local schools, they need to have a voice, they need to have a much greater voice. We certainly need to get the federal government out of our education system, but as a state, this is a state issue. I mean, it's not just this thing is going on in St. Louis or Kansas City, and so if I'm in the rural area, it doesn't affect me. Of course it does, because it affects everyone as a state and the state economy, how much we're paying for taxes to go to entitlement programs, to prisons, whether or not these kids are getting good, high-paying jobs, because if they don't have the education to do it, those jobs won't be available to them.
Let's talk about where you would actually serve. And one of the main jobs the lieutenant governor has is to preside over the Senate. There's new Senate leadership, I guess maybe promoted Senate leadership. Bob Onder from here in the St. Louis area, Senator Onder's now in leadership. But how do you get along with Senator Richards, Senator Kehoe?
I get along with all of them wonderfully. I mean, there is no issue that I have with anyone in the Senate. I know a lot of those gentlemen. I've known them for a number of years. See Bob Onder all the time on the campaign trail, as Ron Richards, and I have a good relationship with them. So I know that when I'm elected lieutenant governor, that relationship will just continue, and we'll solidify it and be able to work together really well.
Senator Kehoe is quite a statesman that kind of has a vision for the state.
Yes, I've met Mike. I know him less, I think, than the other two, but I certainly know him, and I've gotten a chance to visit with him over the years. I think that what people have to keep in mind with the lieutenant governor is you have such an enormous platform, and you have great opportunities to do things. Given my background, that I grew up in the southeast part of the state, my whole family's still there in an agricultural community, but for the last 16 years, I've lived and worked in Kansas City. I know how to bridge the two. I know how to bridge the differences in the agricultural part of the state.
Right?
Exactly. I know that. I understand it, and I'm very sensitive to all of it.
Last question. A big issue that ended last session was whether or not to start using PQs to pass things. Obviously, the Senate's been a saucer that cooled things. little bit less so last session. What is your view on that? Do you view the Senate more traditionally, or do you think they should become more like the House?
Well, I don't think that they have deviated greatly from the way things have been done for most of the time, for many years. I think using the PQ in the instances when it has happened, like with right to work recently, I think that was one of the times it really needed to happen. The discussion on that issue had been going on for many years. So in that instance, I'm very in favor of it. I think Ron Richard did the right thing. We really needed to move the ball on that. And I think that under the circumstances, I would not have done things any differently. And I certainly have been a huge supporter of right to work for a long time. But as far as things being done traditionally, I think they will continue to be done traditionally for the most part, but the rules are there in place and, for a reason, and that there are times when I think PQ is necessary, and when it's been used of late, I think it's been necessary.
It'll be interesting, especially if you're in the dais when we start making those decisions in I guess, session after next. But until then, thank you very much for coming on This Week in Missouri Politics. Very glad to have you. Look forward to having you back as the campaign goes on.
All right. Thanks a lot, Scott. It's great to be here.
Great. And we'll leave you till we come back with our Opinion Maker panel with this week's Missouri Economic Indicators.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're now joined by our Opinion Maker panel, starting with Mark Dalton, the political director for the Carpenters Union. Good to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Angela Bingaman, Democratic fundraiser, first time on. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Speaking of first time on, Dean Plocher running this November in a special election in the 89th district here in St. Louis, correct?
Correct.
Good to have you on.
Great to be here. Thank you.
And back with us this week is former Speaker Tim Jones. Speaker, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And let's start off with a topic that you will know a lot about, managing a Republican caucus that is very large. This week, a new chapter in the Right to Work inter-party drama came out with AFP launching ads against lawmakers that didn't change their vote, but this week now launching some ads in favor of folks that did change their vote. Give us the breakdown on how that impacts the caucus going forward.
Well, Scott, as you know, with any family, there's going to be squabbles. There's going to be arguments. And as your family grows, you're going to have more opportunity for more of those squabbles to go on. From my position, I'm very happy with the 96 people that stuck together and voted in favor of this position. You've got 20 people who did not. they might need a little re-education perhaps, and that's what Americans for Prosperity is continuing to do as we go down the line. You know, it's a minority of a minority in the Republican caucus that voted against this measure. I think you're going to see that 96 number grow over the next couple of years.
Do you think that's the way to make it grow, though, is to attack people?
You know, I don't consider it attacking. I consider it pointing out. They're talking about the issue and why the Republican Party in Missouri has decided to go with this issue. I also want to point out there's some very positive ads being run for those who feel they took a tough vote. Dan Shaw is being praised on the airwaves.
That seems to be a pretty classy move. The other one seems to be, I think they would view it as they're being attacked. You know what I mean?
Well, welcome to politics. You know, it's been that way since the early 1800s when people challenged each other to duels. You know, so at least we've put away the gunfire, and now it's word speak flying back and forth.
Was there ever a vote where you campaigned on something, you voted in the regular session, then switched your vote in veto session?
I try to remain as consistent as possible. Yeah. I'd have to really think on that. Maybe on probably a less innocuous bill. Nothing major like this.
Dean, you're running for office right now. You're correct. Telling folks on the doorstep where you stand on those issues.
Correct.
If you run on those, you get elected, you vote in the regular session. Well, walk us through, would you change? I mean, the people that are meeting you right now, they have to wonder if you're going to flip later.
I'm going to be voting for right to work. I'll be adding to the 96 tally, as Speaker Jones pointed out. I think it's an important topic. I'm glad to see they're pushing it and perhaps re-educating people. I don't see this as being the bloody island, though, if you will. I think one of the pivotal points to get right to work might be to focus on the governorship. I think getting a good governor in office should be paramount.
Now, that's
to the
one thing
party.
Speaker Richardson pointed out. If you want right to work, you have to pretty much elect a pro-right to work governor.
You do, but I think re-education simultaneously, a two-front attack, is good. And as long as it's not too negative, I think it's a good approach.
Mark Dalton, your job is in politics. It is a little bit odd sometimes to read some of the attacks. If a person tells their constituents they have a position, they vote for that in regular session, they get elected, they get recruited, they even get supported by their party to run. Some of these seats are what you need to win a majority, and then they get attacked for not switching, and people that do switch get praised as having integrity.
Right.
I guess it all depends on where you fall, but this is a little bit of an odd situation.
Well, to me, and I think to the most Missourians, the title of representative is exactly what their position should be. They represent their district. If their district comes out opposing anything, such as right to work, which I think many of these legislators they made their case clear that the majority of my constituents oppose right to work. I'm here to represent them. I see the integrity in that, standing by the people that elected them, the people that put them in office, not others in, say, either in the party or leadership or that are pushing right to work, that maybe none of them even elect them into office, but pressuring and basically bullying them into switching their viewpoint of basically how they represent their constituents. I don't see that as productive. And I mean, I think it would be more productive to stick together as a whole, each caucus, on the other 95% of the issues. I mean, you'll never get 100% of people to agree on everything.
Sure.
So,
Angel, let me ask you: rational, educated adults change their minds, right? You see things, you change your mind. Is it time to change your mind, though, during a campaign so your constituents can decide whether they support you? Or is it after you've been elected and campaigned one way? I mean, there seems to be, I don't know that there's a lack of integrity anywhere, but it certainly wouldn't seem to be with a person that votes the way they promised.
No, I agree. I think during a campaign season, you have to be very cognizant that the people that you represent are going to be the ones that put you back in office. So in this case, if you do change your mind, of course, everyone has, the liberty to change their mind. I think if they're trying to garner support within their district and say that they are in a majority union district that supports the opposition of right to work, and they feel pressure from the caucus to change their vote, they need to articulate that to the constituents and maybe say a prayer that they get reelected. So instead of focusing, I believe, and I agree with Mark, instead of focusing on changing the votes within the majority to override the governor's veto, I think the Republicans should pull together their support and try to take the governor's office, and that will take a unified front with money and resources. And I just feel that attacking individual small fish to get to override a Democratic veto, maybe wait till 16 and put their focus there.
Dean Blocker, let me ask you. She mentioned the governor's office. Let's talk. We have a new person entering the race, Eric Greitens.
Yes.
He had a big rollout this week, bigger in some places than others, obviously. But what'd you think?
Hey, I'm excited for the governor's race. I think much like the U.S. presidential race, we have a lot of good candidates out there. I'm glad to see Greitens finally enter the race, and I'm really grateful that John Brunner appears to be entering the race this coming Monday. So,
Do you have a favorite yet?
no, too close to call. Still happy to hear everything that they have to say and engage in some good dialogue here. I think the dialogue is going to be important going forward. Where they stand on all these issues and explain them to everybody, the rural and the urban issues alike. There's a lot to be discussed. So I'm excited to get the field set and then to march forward here.
Speaking of people changing their minds, Eric Greitens comes over to the Republican Party during your time in the legislature. Pretty big rollout, a lot of money. What do you think?
It was presidential in many respects. I will point out one thing. The Democrats have one person running for governor. He's a white guy who used to be a Republican, So, I don't know if you can lose much, with the field we have. On our side, diverse, broad field. We have a woman running for governor for the first time ever in our state. We've got some business owners. We've got some folks who have won statewide many, many times. So I'm excited about our field, much more excited than the white guy who used to be a Republican on the other side. So I think it's a good contrast to point out. Chris Koster is not really a Republican anymore. I don't know that he's really a Democrat. He's the party of Chris Koster, and he's the best political animal I've ever seen. And if he can fool the people one more time and get elected governor, I think kudos to him. But
You think he has
I think we have
competition
a
with
good
Eric
alternative.
Greitens, though? In being a political animal?
I think he's got competition with Eric Greitens. I think he's got competition with Catherine Hanaway, which is a real contrast in a positive way for Catherine. Real contrast with Peter Kinder and with John Brunner. So I think we've got good contrasts all around.
Angela Bingman, who as a Democrat fundraiser, Eric Greitens has to be pretty scary. I mean, if he comes through the primary and accomplishes what Koster did, changing parties, getting the nomination, that seems to be a pretty tough general.
Yes, and I agree. I think that Koster's biggest threat is Eric Greitens. However, and if we're talking dollars and cents, Chris Koster has raised $4 million on hand. Eric Greitens has raised $1 million in less than a month. That's scary. Going forward, the question is, can Eric Greitens get through a Republican primary? I don't know the answer to that question. On the Democratic side, let's just hope he doesn't. However, we do have a self-funder in John Brunner, so when it comes to money, I think those are the two biggest competition to Chris Koster. I think Peter Kinder on name ID would be a very tough competition as well. However, when it comes down to the nuts and bolts and the policy and the whole package, money being in the forefront, I think Eric Greitens is definitely going to be Chris Koster's biggest competition.
Largest cash race, I think, ever in the state of Missouri history for this
Really?
governor's race.
Yes.
Even in a presidential year.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Mark Dalton, what do you think? I mean, Greitens had a very strong rollout.
No, there's definitely some strong contenders on the Republican side, and Koster is on the Democratic side. The only one there, but I just have to, from my perspective, and I think most Missourians, I have to agree with Tim on this one that he doesn't come across as either a Democrat or Republican. He sees both sides of the issue, which I think would be very beneficial for the state.
He was pretty hard about coming off as a Democrat this weekend. I mean, coming off as a Republican. He didn't address being a Democrat, but he definitely sort of said he had transformed and was a conservative outsider. So he's doing his best to look as right as he can look, right? I mean, right now.
Well, right now, but just have to go back to. He is going to be very good as governor, working both sides and putting forth, pushing legislation and laws that benefit the majority of Missourians.
Give me a quick take. Who wins the primary?
On that side, I'd say it's hard to say, but Peter Kinder has a large name ID. It's going to be hard to
Angela, who wins that primary?
I see either Peter Kinder or Eric Greitens if he can get through.
Mr. Speaker, who wins the primary?
I go with the name ID, Kinder or Hanaway. Greitens has got too many unknowns right now. Can you make it up in 9 or 10 months? I think it's very difficult.
Dean, who wins the primary?
I would go with name ID. I agree with Speaker Jones. You have to really move fast and raise a ton of money to get that name ID out there, as Greitens would have to do. Hanaway has held the speakership as well, although it was 11 years ago. Peter Kinder's won three statewide elections here, and is currently in office. Great name ID. I put him at the forefront.
Quick take, does Senator Chappelle-Nadal run for Congress?
The word is she is. I think she'd be a strong challenger to Lacey Clay, so it'll be interesting to see.
Mr. Speaker, as a lover of politics, that's got to be fun.
Lacey Clay's going, how do you solve a problem like Maria right now? You know, my wife would appreciate the Sound of Music reference. You know, if you can predict Maria Chappelle-Nadal, you know, bully for you. You figured it out. I like Maria's stances on education reform, and she's been the biggest, most vocal opponent of the governor than any other Republican in the state. But is she going to run for Congress? It's a big leap for her to make, but maybe she believes that's where her political paths go.
Angela, what do you think? Does she run?
I don't know. You know, I think that Maria makes up her mind, and that's what she's going to do. So at this point, it could be either way. Do I think that she could beat Lacey? No.
Mark Dalton, does she run?
It seems to roll out. She's positioning herself to run.
Lacey Clay's strong. I mean, there was a primary with Josh Peters and his whole team engaged, and they won that convincingly. I mean, Lacey Clay wins elections.
Yes, he does have a very good reputation in that district. He is going to be hard to beat. I don't want to be biased. I know Lacey Clay has helped us on many issues, as Maria has in the Senate as well.
Someone say he has backbone, right?
Correct.
One quick take. This week, Senator Schaefer, Sanctity of Life Committee, scored a huge victory when MU separated from Planned Parenthood. How does that help him in his primary?
It definitely helps him with his base. I know that's something that's very important to them. So I think his base, seeing that as a victory, definitely helps him out.
Big week for Schaefer, right?
Definitely. I think that in his primary, he is running against someone who may be even more conservative than him. So taking that stance is good.
It's one thing to be a college professor and theoretically be, and then actually shutting down an abortion clinic.
Exactly. So I think
play well in Poplar Bluff.
It does, definitely.
Mr. Speaker, big week for Senator, right?
It was. He's been the happy warrior on fiscal issues as a budget hawk, but he's got to protect that right flank, because on his first two elections for senator, and on the re-elect as well, his social issues were definitely more liberalized. He's from Boone County, you know, and so he's got to shore that up. Josh Hawley presents an interesting counterpart to that. David Humphreys, mega billionaire donor, threw in on the two big issues right now: litigation reform and right to work, and he went with Josh Hawley. So it's going to be an interesting race.
Dean Blocker, as a right to work supporter, make you a little nervous that a guy that voted for a PQ even 5 days later gets $500,000 dumped against him. I mean, with friends like that,
certainly
who
would.
needs enemies?
It shows the money has an overriding influence often in the Capitol, and it's a shame, but it is what it is, and we're moving forward.
Last thing, I got to have the speaker's hashtags for the week.
Hashtags of the week.
Yes,
there, Scott.
absolutely.
We've got election 2016. If you don't think it hasn't started, then you're missing the boat. It's off to the races. Carly Cruisin', my little play on words. Carly and Ted Cruz are definitely rising in the polls as some others are lagging or falling. And Mo Gavaluzza, this is going to be
my favorite.
Something that we've never seen before in Missouri with the cash and the interesting candidates that we have on both sides.
This brings us to our tweet of the week from Senator Eric Schmidt from here in St. Louis. He actually got in a Twitter war with the official Cubs account, and I love how he brought back the 1908 vintage wine reference. And so we'll leave you this week on This Week in Missouri Politics with our tweet of the week and look forward to playoff baseball.